I'm going to throw out a couple. You take whatever you want.
All right.
One of them is this notion of being faced with these huge, literally world-changing problems like the collapse of the oceans.
Yeah.
Um, it's so often. I mean, I'm an environmental activist. I've written bazillions of books on that,
Yeah.
and I still, there's a part of me that cannot believe that this culture is actually killing the oceans. And so there's this line from Judith Herman's book Trauma and Recovery. The first or second line is something about how trauma is something that is so awful that it is beyond words. That's the meaning of the word unspeakable. So I guess what I'm saying is, one direction is, so many of the things we're facing are so horrific and so large that it's like really easy to just, hey, I think solar panels will solve all the problems, to search
Yeah.
for easy non-solutions that affect how we feel more than how the reality is. That's one thing. And I'll say one more thing and then I'll shut up. And another possibility, like two more things. Another possibility is to talk about what you were saying um, about car culture being non-sustainable, which is embarrassing. We even have to say that out loud too. And the third possibility is I interviewed this guy recently who has this really interesting thing about how community has changed. And I love his language because he's not saying this is a good thing. He says community has changed from being place-based to aspirational-based. So instead of it being based on reality, as you're talking about, it's based on what we wish. And so take any of those any direction you want.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, there's an app for that. That's I think that's our general idea of how we solve problems these days. That you just get the app. If the ocean's collapsing, you get the ocean regeneration app and plug it into your iPhone, and make the ocean just fine. The whole suburban car dependent matrix is of endless fascination to me. Um, and it represents, you can view it in a lot of ways. Uh, I like to think of it as the greatest misallocation of resources in the history of the world, and as a living arrangement with no future. And as I said, it has no future because we're not going to have the oil products to run it. We're not going to substitute uh, alt energy devices to take the place of the oil-based things that we're doing now. That's a fantasy, and it's largely a fantasy because you can't really fabricate, manufacture, and run that stuff without an underlying platform of a fossil fuel economy. And so a lot of people are wasting their time and wasting their hopes, dreams, wishes, and fantasies on that.
And wasting everybody else's time too, by the way.
Oh yeah, and especially in a very urgent moment in human history when we don't have a whole lot of time to waste fooling around with this stuff. Um, there's an angle to the thing. I'm sorry to digress again, but
No, please, please,
there's
please do.
there's an angle to what we were talking about earlier, which is why and how we got to a reality optional culture. And one of the things that ought to fascinate us is the idiocy of the things that intellectuals are interested in today. You know, especially if you think about it politically. If you think that the university people and the academics and the policy people are largely in the Democratic political pool in the United States. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
For the most part. I mean, there are conservative intellectuals, but an awful lot of the professional, cadre of paid intellectuals are in the Democratic fold. And look at the things that they're interested in today. You know, transsexualism. How important is that? And what percentage of the population is transsexual, and, and and how much can we really do about their psychological quandaries as a political thing?
And I would just like
And
to point out that the New York Times, talk about non-reality based, the New York Times talks about human beings transitioning from male to female.
yeah,
And biologically, that's not how it works.
Well, that's
a
because it's a
simulation of a
reality
thing.
optional newspaper.
Exactly, a simulation of a thing is not the thing itself.
Yeah.
So the stodgy New York Times, which worries very much about whether you should use that or which in a sentence, has made biology optional, which is stunning to me.
Yeah, and it's an indication of our uh, increasing inability to think clearly about anything. The final product of all that is we become unable to construct a coherent consensus about what's happening to us, and therefore we cannot make a coherent plan to do anything about it.
So
Now,
wait,
I
wait, wait,
happen
wait,
to
wait,
believe
wait a
that,
sec. Could I? Sorry to interrupt, but did you say
consensus.
coherent consensus of what is happening to us?
Yeah, we can't
Okay,
construct a coherent consensus about what is happening to us.
can you be specific? Sorry to interrupt, but can you be specific about what you mean by what is happening to us? I agree with you. I just want more
Yeah.
detail.
Well, for example, the suburban matrix we were just talking about. It's self-evident that we're going to really have to reorganize the physical arrangement of living on the terrain of North America. We're not going to be able to continue to live in suburban Dallas and Minneapolis and the Washington Beltway suburbs. That stuff is going to fail, and it's going to fail grotesquely and badly. And what our destination really is having to return to walkable communities. But we're unable to even have a conversation about that. Every conversation about transportation that we're having is just about how to substitute one sort of motive power for another. We never talk about maybe it would be a good thing if we became conscious of the need to move back to walkable communities and neighborhoods.